I'm Ethan Van Sciver. I draw for DC Comics. Once I drew for Marvel, but I mostly draw for DC Comics. I have for 15 years. I draw Green Lantern, I've drawn The Flash, I've drawn Superman, Batman, I've drawn X-Men. Right now I'm drawing Batman on Dark Knight.
I'm Kieron Gillen. I've basically been writing for comics, in a more serious way since 2006. I'm kind of known for my indie work. On one hand, stuff like Phonogram, which is a comic about pop music and magic, and that kind of led to me doing a load of stuff for Marvel, where I've written books including Thor, Uncanny X-Men. I'm currently writing Iron Man and Young Avengers, that kind of thing. But I kind of do books like Uber here for Avatar. I did the whole sort of gamut from like small stuff to large stuff.
These characters make me one of the world's most famous cartoonists everywhere outside of North America. I write and draw Karl Barks's Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge comics for Europe, where I did for about 20 years.
I'm John Layman. I write Chew for Image Comics and Detective for DC, and I just finished Mars Attacks for IDW.
Yeah, well, I broke into comics by doing my own comics. I had a comic book that I drew for my friends. I worked at an airbrush booth and a caricature stand at the mall when I was a teenager. And so I would do my comic book for them. For my friends who also worked there, they were also artists, and they also wanted to break into comics. And we had kind of a competitive thing where I would show them new pages and they would show me theirs. One day I just got the wild idea to submit my comic book idea to a small press company. And I found a company in Indiana that was known for publishing other teenage artists. And they liked what they saw and published 2 issues of my creator-owned book, Sciver. And once you have that book that's been published, it's a lot easier to work your way into one of the big 2.
Well, my sort of background is that I was a journalist and a critic. I primarily wrote about video games. I kind of, I did that since 1997 full time. In 2003, I left and became freelance, and I was doing it for the love of it. And eventually, I did that, and I was doing criticism at the same time, and eventually got to a position where I was kind of known enough, I'd done enough interesting work, and I was basically invited to sort of, me and Jamie were doing a comic called Phonogram, as I mentioned earlier, and they said, you should pitch it to Image. Image said yes, and that came out, and that was kind of my indie film calling card. And being a freelance journalist, I was able to sort of balance the two. And the way I sort of treated it was, my day job was like my 9 to 5. I worked as a writer, and I did everything that earned money. And in the evening, I did my comic stuff, which wasn't really earning money. And eventually became a point where I was aware that I was actually earning more money from doing comics than I was from journalists. At that point, I kind of did a mental switch. So instead of being a journalist who did comics, I was a comic writer who occasionally did journalism. I mean, basically, I've never really gone to a company and said, I want to write for you. I've always basically done the work I've done, and that has led to giving more work. But my first story in the Marvel Universe was an 8-page Dazzler mini, and that led to like a Sabretooth 1 issue, and that led to a 5-issue Sword thing, which led to doing Generation Home, which led to doing Uncanny X-Men. That kind of opened up the next door. And so the message I take away from that I try to tell people, the work is the work, and people do how do I break in? And that isn't the problem. The problem is never breaking in. The problem is being good enough. Because if you broke in and you're not good enough, why the hell would you want to do that? I mean, that's the big problem. Actually, it's a question of craft. It's a question of like what you want to bring to the table. And I didn't pitch at Marvel or anyone. Well, in fact, I said I didn't really pitch until I was invited. But I wasn't really interested in being published until I thought my work was worth reading. And that's what I'd recommend concentrating upon, and doing your work and getting it out there. And that leads to the opportunity for me. To be honest, breaking is you network, you talk to it. That's minor bullshit. Really, it's about doing work, and the work is the only thing that matters for me.
Well, that's a pretty long story. I have always been a comic book collector and reader, and I drew comics. I drew comics for fanzines and for newspapers and so on, just for fun, never for pay. But my degree is in civil engineering. I ran the family construction company until 1986, when one of those small American companies started publishing Disney comics again in about 1986, and I decided to just do one story for them that I'd always dreamt of doing, an Uncle Scrooge adventure, and I did that in 1987, and that was the first professional work I'd ever done, and it was nominated for the Best Story of the Year in the Eisner Awards. It was the Harvey Awards. They were preceded the Eisner Awards. So I thought I'd try another one, and one thing led to another, and I found out that these are still the world's most popular comic books every place outside of the United States. So I was invited to go to work for the world's biggest comic publisher in Europe, and I did that for about 20 years.
I worked at newspapers, and I was like a Jimmy Olsen, deliver the mail and freelance stories, and I became an assistant editor at Wildstorm. Then I went back to the paper and wrote a comic book column in the book section for like a year, and then I got hired back at Wildstorm as a full editor. Then DC bought us, and all this time I was like editing the books for several years, learning how it's done. I always wanted to write, and there was a point where I just decided to make the jump, and so kind of scrimped with small gigs, and each gig got bigger and bigger, and 15 years later I'm writing Batman and Chew.
The people who make it are the people who generally draw all the time anyway. I mean, you have to really want to do this for a living to the point where you would do it for free. And you have a lot of ideas going through your head, and you probably should be drawing your own comic book anyway, at that point. People who don't make it, people who get in and then sort of fail, succeed, are people that complain, that make editors' lives difficult.
Every writer's different. There's writers who have great work ethics. That's not me. There's writers who are lazy and want to do anything but write. That's me. There's story writers, there's character writers, there's concept writers, there's idea men, there's execution men and women. There's no right answer to that question of what makes a writer, because they're all so different. I would say the same about artists.
I just roll out of bed at whatever hour I want. It could be 4 p.m. Because I'll work overnights, and I'll work very unsteady hours. I'll work for 24 hours straight, and then just go to sleep at whatever time that is, and wake up and do it again. So sometimes I'll be up all night. I like to just have some eggs for breakfast, some coffee, and then just start drawing. Protein and caffeine just makes you kind of buzz, and you just are able to draw. And I'll keep my Facebook, my computer on over here, so if I get a stupid idea in my head, instead of calling someone and wasting time, I'll just type it on Facebook and then just get back to work. It lets you, Facebook is awesome because it lets you stay social while you're living an isolated, kind of troglodytic life, which is what we all kind of end up living.
I get up about 5:30 in the morning, try to squeeze a couple pages in before my kid gets up, and then a babysitter comes for a couple hours, try to squeeze another page or two if I can, and then he gets to preschool, and by then the creative juices are almost gone, so I'm doing like administrative stuff and lettering and business stuff, and then it starts anew the next day.
The moment when you feel like God, in that kind of way you've created this thing, suddenly all the ideas come together and it all joins into one big thing. And that is, that incandescence, the idea of it's being done through you and then sort of the flow and the beauty, that's the kind of the big high level thing. And being this, you get to see something else, as in basically it's fascinating to see that something that you sort of conceived actualised. That for me is like, that's addictive. Anytime you get new pages, whether they're good or whether you hate them, there's something deeply addictive about that.
Well, when you do these kind of comics, the appreciation of millions of people in Europe That's certainly, it's not the money, certainly, again, in doing these comics. You don't get paid much in Disney comics. They take all the money. But the appreciation kept me going for 20 years before I got sick of it. I mean, the system.
Getting the books, like having a bookshelf that you can look at with your own name and your own stuff. Like all the work sucks, but then afterwards to be holding a comic in your hand that you're proud of, there's no better feeling.
The great thing about drawing comics for a living is, first, the lifestyle is great because you make your own hours and you're drawing for a living. Let's just be frank, it's fun. But the best thing about it is that there's a finished product for your work, which I don't think you can say in all other professions. Even in better paid and more respectable positions in life, doctor, lawyer, etc., there really isn't anything you can hold in your hand to say, all of that work that I did, here it is. With comics, you actually have a direct product that you can show people that has your name on it and you worked on. And that's incredibly rewarding. And the money's good too. The money's excellent.
Be ready to be poor and be ready to eat shit for a long time, and don't go in thinking you're going to get rich, because 99 times out of 100 you won't. Maybe 9 times out of 10, whatever. You got to do it for the love, and the love will get you there. But just desire to, if you think you're going to hit a jackpot in comics, you're going to be in for some disappointment.
Yeah, I would love that the next crop of artists and writers just came in and were so in love with the comics that they read, the comics that my generation is putting out, that they just wanted to just do even better. And they had bigger and better ideas than what we did. Because that's what my generation is doing. We read the stuff from the 80s, 70s and 80s and 90s, and we just exploded into the business like we're going to take it one step further. And I love that. I love that one-upmanship. I want the next crop of creative people to be determined to do it for the love of doing it first. And when you do it that way, money follows. Do it because you want a lasting legacy, because of your own work, because you respect the legacy of these great characters that we're so privileged to get to work on. I mean, these characters are 75, 80 years old. And they've been around. They're bulletproof. They've been around for ages and ages. Generations have discovered them and loved them, and now it's your turn to make them even better.
Every relationship is different. Some artists require a lot of hand-holding, some don't. Some want to be your best friend, some you want to keep it professional. Like, you really cannot just learn early, and it just depends. And there's some people you go back to that you want to work with again and again because it works so well. You never know.
Communication. Hopefully the writer wants to talk to you. There have been a few circumstances where the writer just says, I don't talk to the artist. That's between the editor and the artist, and that's tough because the scripts often contain problems that you want to ask the writer about. But best case scenario, and almost all the time, the writer is available via the phone, and just talking to them about the way that you work and that you prefer to work, and that kind of thing is always the best way to go about it. And usually the writers want to make the artist happy. And when that happens, the artist can make the writers happy. It's a good thing.
It was my childhood dream. Yes. It's what I dreamt of since my earliest memory. It was writing and drawing Uncle Scrooge comics, and I got to do it for 20-something years.
I've wanted to be a comic book writer my entire life. Like, that's all I ever wanted from when I was like 7 or 8. And I didn't know how to do it. They didn't have the internet then. I would go to shows when I was in high school, or even younger, and they were a lot smaller. And I can't imagine anything else because that's all I've ever tried to do. And everything, I was an English major in school because that is like writing. And and then I went to newspapers because that was writing. And I moved to San Diego because the San Diego Con was there. Like, everything was like, oh, will this get me closer to comics? And eventually it did.
Yes, I wanted this job when I was 12, 13 years old. Before that I wanted to be a paleontologist, but I'm too stupid to study dinosaurs. I'm just smart enough to draw comic books. And this is the job I wanted. It's the job a lot of my friends wanted. It was in the town that I grew up, the equivalent of Luke Dreams. You know, we watched the Image guys. We watched John Byrne. We watched these guys that really looked like they were having so much fun drawing superheroes. And like I said, it's the job they all wanted, and I chased it, and I got it at age 19. None of them did from Merchantville, New Jersey, but I did. And so yeah, it is utopia for me. This is exactly what I wanted. It's exactly where I was going to be, and I'm going to do this until I die. And having said that, I'll probably get hit by a bus.
I've been lucky in my life. I've managed to basically do jobs I've genuinely enjoyed for most of the time. And a lot of time I've had very little money, but you know, I've always been my friends. I've just been lucky in that way, you know. So maybe I do. You know, you do it as long as you love it, and you just try to stop before. If you can sort of see if you're becoming bitter and hate film or whatever, you just stop doing that. It's bad for you.